Okay, so welcome to another Blue Star Ask Blue podcast, or it's a podcast this time. That's why I'm here. That's why Jord's here. We're going to be talking about a theme within the retail and hospitality industry today. We're going to be primarily covering payments. So that's why I brought our payments geek, payment specialist rather, Jord Malcops along. Good to see you again, Jord.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Always a pleasure to spend any time with you, and also because my although I've been in the industry a long time, my payments knowledge might be a little bit out of date. I'm not sure if we still use goats to trade for buying products and services in stores anymore. So we brought along a couple of technology experts from the payment industry to bring us fully up to date in terms of what's happening with payments. So welcome also Nikolai and Morgan from our partner TidyPay. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Good. Travelled all the way from the Nordics to be with us. Look, you guys, we know you really well, but just for the benefit of people that don't know you, tell us a little bit. Introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, your background, credentials in the payment industry.
Right. How long do we have?
As long as you take as long as it's no more than a minute.
Okay, no. So keep it simple then. Morgan Sellen, CEO of TidyPay. Been working in the industry for I would say all my adult life. That's roughly 23 years now. So payment geek.
Excellent. Nikolai.
I'll take it from here then. Yes, thank you. My name is Nikolai. I also work at TidyPay, of course, which is why I'm here, right? Yes. So my position, I like to present myself as a professional payment nerd, right?
Nice.
So when I don't think and talk about payments all day, I like to go out and make payments myself, of course, in the shops.
Who doesn't love to pay for things? Yeah.
Well,
buying things is fun. Paying for things is less fun. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting paid.
Just getting the goats.
A little bit more fun. Yeah.
Morgan, you're from Sweden?
Sweden, Stockholm.
Denmark,
a little bit north of Copenhagen, yeah.
Yeah, you're
Netherlands.
I'm from the UK, so really almost pan-European podcast cast for the podcast today. So yeah, well let's dive straight into this. I think if we're going to start to talk about payments, the logical starting point I think has to be how are consumers behaving? What's happening there? What's changing there? And if I think about when I go shopping, if I think about how I used to buy things, I'm not going back to the mid 15th century when I started out in this industry and everything was bought with trade in livestock. But I mean, even 10, 15, 20 years ago, I'd probably use cash. You'd have to go to the ATM, take cash out of your wallet. But that's changing now. What's everyone's experience of paying for things in shops and hospitality these days?
I think we've seen a very accelerated sort of revolution, right? I remember 20 years ago, it's people were doing like magnet stripe transactions, maybe some manual card entry transactions, and then all of a sudden, cash, of course, yes, yeah. Cash.
Checks.
Checks. Do you remember checks?
Almost.
I have no clue what it is.
It's something old people talk about, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I can explain that then if that's what you mean. But yeah, checks. You write how much you pay.
I owe you.
Yeah, it's almost like that. Yeah, it's like a early version of the credit card. Yeah, so yeah, checks, cash. That's history. But yeah, but these days I think we're more likely to pay with certainly with a card, tap to pay, contactless. Probably with a phone as well.
I think if you see now, everyone can go back themselves. You're changing maybe your payment methods and how you use them fairly often right now. And I think most of us are now embedded our card in our Apple Pay or Google Pay, for example. And we also probably have a couple of other payment options, alternative payment methods.
Yeah.
That we see in the local countries that are various. And then, of course, we have probably a couple of different accounts with different buy now, pay later suppliers. So it's changing dramatically, and it changes all the time also.
Yeah, I mean, buy now, pay later, that's something that's become quite really popular online. You always seem when you're paying online to be given the option to buy now, pay later. But also, I think actually at the point of sale, at the checkout in a shop, that's something. Are people really using that, do you think?
I think it's a very much like I think it's very much a sort of a cultural thing, right? So in some countries, I think it's very prevalent. I think in Sweden they use it a lot, right? Klarna, etc.
I think we discussed this a little bit earlier. You can see that there's a natural step to do it in an online environment. For example, you're buying plane tickets, everything, and you want to pay after you receive the service. And then that type of payment methods is rather good. Instead of using your debit card, it's automatically withdrawn from your account. But in the physical environments, I think it's more used because you want to use the financial service of split the payments.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I guess it's ultimately it's what the consumers want that's driving these new methods. So if consumers demand that, then the retailers and even to some extent people in hospitality are going to have to do that. What are some other technologies that we're seeing in terms of payment at retail? I think especially, I guess if you look outside of retail, look at hospitality, things like QR codes for payment, so you can actually got the app to be able to do the whole payment on your, so you can order on your phone and pay on your phone at the table without actually, I don't mind interacting with waiting staff, waiters, waitresses, that sort of thing. But
well, I think this accelerated quite heavily in the pandemic, right? So basically, I think right now in the Netherlands, at least, we see a lot that, for example, the menu boards are still on the QR code. The payment, however, is already disappearing a little bit. In the pandemic, of course, it was very good because you had no interaction with, any employees, so it was safe. But now I think, the menu boards, when I go to a restaurant, it's still there. But the payment is just done physical, right? There's actually somebody coming to you and, with a device, and also that, gives an opportunity to tip as well, because of course in the QR code, that wasn't built in.
Yeah. Although sometimes they do build it in. Sometimes often you see, which I quite like, you see more and more a suggested tip included in the bill, and then you've actually got to ask them to take the tip off. I think if there's, it helps, because especially if you do a lot of international travel, you don't really know, what is it?
What's the percentage?
Is it 5% in the UK? Is it 20% in the US? You never really know.
So is it 50% in the US?
Yeah. Do I need to buy now, pay later just to pay the way to the tip?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it can be quite helpful. So,
but also I think what you said drives by consumers, right? There's a big difference, for example, between me and my dad, right? We traveled a couple of weeks ago somewhere, and he still has this wallet, like this big wallet in his back pocket, right, with cash and all the cards and everything involved. I'll travel by phone. It's the only thing I have, right? I got my ID and I got my phone. If somebody asks me, well, you need to tap a card, I'm pretty much screwed, right? I have no ways of paying at that time, right? But
I'm somewhere halfway between that. So I've got my phone, and I would much prefer to pay by my phone, but I don't quite trust it enough that I've got tucked in the back of the case. I've got some cash, and I've probably got at least one card tucked in the back of the phone case as well. So
if you travel, you probably, I'll take a card, of course, when I travel, because you never know. For example, today in Spain, we don't know, right? If I have to pay with credit card or by phone, I don't know if it works. But I think in the UK, how many times, do you pull out your actual card on the back of your phone?
I think
not often.
No. You actually take with your card to be able to withdraw money from ATM in order to pay cash. If you're going abroad, you don't take it with you because I think more or less everyone accepts payment now by NFC, and that means that every Apple Pay and Google Pay device works. But if they want to accept cash, well, then you need to go to an ATM, and then you need your card often.
But I think as well with the ATM side, at least in the Netherlands, they're disappearing quite heavily. But I think there's like 1 out of 10 in the last 5 years that it's still survived, and it's basically all consolidated to one bank that owns basically, provides the service of the ATM. So there's only one brand in the Netherlands that has an ATM, and it's like maybe 2 in each town. That's probably it, approximately.
It's still very much like a cultural, but also a little bit of generational thing, right?
Yes.
Like from us in the Nordics, I don't remember the last time I carried cash, let alone like a physical plastic card. At all.
Yeah, but in the Nordics, what's the percentage of paying by card?
I think 95%.
Yeah, that's high.
Yeah, I think it's almost unmeasurable right now.
Yeah.
But now we're discussing not the split between cash and card. Now we're discussing the digital payments and the split between traditional Visa, MasterCard transactions and the percentage of alternative payment methods. Like in Sweden, we have Swish.
What's Swish?
Swish is based upon that you are doing account-to-account payments.
Okay.
And you can see this different type of payment methods in most all countries in Europe. And very local, but they are working more or less on the same platform in that sense. So now you're seeing then, okay, so it's Visa card transaction, it's open payment transactions, and now we're dividing that and starting to measuring.
Yeah. And I guess, so there's all these consumer behavior that's driving the need to have all of these multiple different payment options. But I think the technology that's enabling that, I think, is primarily Android payment terminals, devices that'll allow that. I mean, talk to us a little bit more about how Android is impacting the market.
Yeah, I mean, Android is impacting, I would say, everything, right? It's not just the payment industry, but I think the market has been a little bit looking for a very open platform. And when you have that, of course, the entrepreneurship within the IT companies starts to emerge. You talked a little bit about the QR code.
Yeah.
You can see that, for example, COVID then required us to do a change, right? And it became very fast before people started to deploy different type of solution with QR codes. And it's based upon that it's fairly easy now to write a piece of code and then deploy it and test it. While a couple of years ago, there were very few open platforms to do that. So Android had made that rapid change, of course, in that sense. And that impacts also the payment industry.
It has also definitely allowed the POS vendors to take more control sort of the ecosystem compared to the traditional payment terminals where it was just, provided with a payment solution directly for the merchant, right?
Yeah, it was pretty much it would do one thing, wouldn't it, really, the payment device. It was almost like, I quite like the analogy of the traditional payment terminal was just for payment. It's a bit like an old-fashioned mobile phone, like a Nokia old mobile phone where, it'll just make phone calls or maybe text messages as well.
That's the one you still use, right?
I'm not that old.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But yeah, it's one device to do one job. Whereas if you look at modern smartphones, it's very similar to an Android payment device. Yes, it'll take payments. Yes, it'll make phone calls. But it's all the other stuff that you can do on it. You wouldn't buy a new iPhone and go, I can't wait to get home and make a phone call on my new iPhone. The phone is just a rarely used app on your phone. And I think, yes, an Android device that will take payment is sure, maybe its primary use is to be able to accept payments, but it's all the other stuff that it'll do as well. You can run your point of sale system on there. You can also, you can run your back office on there. There's all sorts of different applications that you can run on the payment device, which you could never do on an old-fashioned device, which is really just a dumb terminal for taking chip and pin payments, right?
Yeah, and I think if you look from a retailer's perspective, is that they probably have 10 years ago, like different hardware for different purposes. The payment terminal is one thing, and then they have the pool system on one device, and then probably have the order system in another device, etc. So now, of course, with the seeing, like you said, you come home with the Apple phone, you have everything there, or your Android phone, and then you expect that also in this industry.
Yeah.
And now the technology is here, and definitely the hardware.
And of course, from a Blue Star perspective, I think, we dove into payments about 2.5 years ago, right? For me, there's a lot changing in the payment space, right? There's a lot of new technologies coming out, a lot of new solutions. Is that just because we dove into it 2.5 years ago that it seems like there's so many solutions? Or is that, in the past, it was just a simple payment, that's it, no other solution available, and now it's just popping up because of the Android space?
Well, we got into it because we already sell a hell of a lot of Android devices, don't we? So there's not a huge difference between one of the mobile computers that we sell from someone like Zebra, Honeywell, Datalogic, Unitech, that, or an Android touch computer, or a payment device.
Yeah.
There's fundamentally it's the same thing. But yeah, the apps is what's making these devices more interesting, right?
No, I think it's good timing, starting 2-3 years ago. But also now I see, for example, now when the Softpos is launched, like it's also a little bit the response from the card industry, meaning that, okay, we need to adapt to be able to utilize the Android technology in the retail space.
Yeah.
Because if the requirement still was that you need to do payment in a traditional way, then would be a hard thing to lift in the payments in one device. So opening up that means that you're truly going to a pure Android device that is You can almost buy whatever type of device you want, with some limitation, of course, but there's still like they're opening up this system. So that also pushes everything to move over to Android and then this technology.
So what's, for example, the requirement to run a TidyPay application to take payments for you guys?
So now we require a device must have Android 10 or later, and of course it must be GMS certified, meaning it's certified towards like Google services, and then of course it needs to have an NFC antenna to process the payment, right?
Yep.
But
that's the only requirements.
Only requirements, yes.
I would say from a requirements perspective, but then of course we see that if you're going to select a hardware, it needs to suit the purpose of your business, right? If you're going to run a bar or a restaurant, you need to have a device that is reliable and working, have good battery capacity, and the NFC antenna is of course needed to be as strong as you expect, so it's easy for payments. And I think here, for example, is a good thing to remind people of is that you need to look still at from the traditional perspective of what the requirement is on a hardware. Yes, I can run it on my Samsung phone for sure, but if I'm going to run it in my business, it needs to like meet those requirements, and that's a little bit different.
In the bar environment, it's very subject to like, okay, somebody spills a beer or something on it, right? And it needs to preferably survive throughout the night, right? Even in this case.
Yeah, also I suppose people, if you've just gone out and bought yourself a €1,200 iPhone, you don't want to be using that at work as the device that you use to take payments from a personal point of view of someone using that. If you're bringing your own device to work to use as a Softpos payment device, you might not be comfortable about using your own phone. Are you covered insurance or whatever on that? And the other side of it, I think, as well, is if you're approached by someone who, all right, maybe they work in the restaurant or whatever, but if they're just holding their phone out towards you, I don't think people, at least right now, people aren't necessarily ready for that.
And I think, also in this conversation, I think you mentioned Softpos. What is Softpos? What are we talking about here? Because I think that's, it's a new term that we use.
Don't ask me, ask these
a lot of
experts.
Times. Yeah. Explain me, Rich. What's Softpos? No, can you guys, give a little bit more?
Well, I think Softpos is the idea for us, at least, was that we would take the payment application that worked on like traditional Android PCI certified devices. We take the payment application out of them, and then we put them into, your everyday Android device, right? So with the philosophy, of course, in the beginning, bring your own device. But of course, as we talked about, the ruggedized, a little bit more industrial devices is...
And then Softpos is a standard that is issued by Visa, MasterCard, where they have like seen the need to a little bit be more, giving the possibility to be more flexible in the environment of payments in the physical environments. So it's a standard that is driven by them, and then you need to apply it. And then if you are from our perspective, then you're certified by it, then you can launch your application on an Android device. And I think for us, is the interest of is that if you take a normal retail location, for example, they probably have a lot of Android devices already today. So instead of them enabling this just on an ordinary traditional payment method and having one shared by 5 waiters, for example, in a restaurant, then it can now enable this on the already existing 5 Android devices that they're probably also holding in their hand when they're taking order.
Yeah, like typically in a cafe, at least in Denmark, they would have 2 devices, right? They would come down with a phone and then write down whatever you want, and then at the end they will come with another device to take the payment, right? So why not just combine them, and all of a sudden they have, big saving, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I think, that sort of handheld ordering device, obviously that's something that's been around for, at least 10 years in the hospitality industry. It's a much more efficient way of taking orders. You don't have to write it down on a pad, possibly write it down incorrectly, take it back, give it to the kitchen, hope they don't lose it, hope that they get the order right. Whereas if it's done on a mobile device and it just sends the order via Wi-Fi directly back to the kitchen, that's a really efficient way of doing it. I've seen those devices in action, and sometimes if there's a big order, often the people that order the drinks at the beginning at one end of a long table might get their drinks before they're finished actually taking the order at the other end of the table. So great efficiency, but then they've got to, like you say, having to go backwards and forwards with different devices, one for taking the order, one for payment. It's not the most efficient way of doing it.
Yeah, and I think we see it as well, in the past, and I don't know if they start using it already, but for example, the grocery stores that deliver, food to your house, basically, they have 2 devices, right? They have one device to basically mobile computer to have the order in, and then they pull out an Ingenico, for example, and they, pay with the Ingenico device. Instead, I think Softpos can make it happen where we actually pull it together and it's all run on one device.
It definitely opened up the avenue for like new verticals for for payments.
Logistics and transport. It's with courier charges, for example, where especially we get this a lot in the UK, where since we formed the People's Republic of Brexitania a few years ago, we've often a package is delivered from outside of the UK, and you've got to pay extra customs charges on it if that's not covered. So the courier having a Softpos app on their delivery device, which is usually enabled with NFC anyway, or certainly we have devices in our range that are NFC enabled that meet the physical requirements. There's a good good opportunity to be able to use a Softpos payment app to pay that delivery uplift on there. And I think another interesting thing is NFC can also be used in not just in mobile devices, but also in things like fixed point of sale, or even in a touchscreen computer that might be used in a kiosk, which also opens up the opportunity to use Softpos payment methods in lots of different environments, really, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah, I think as well, for example, take the McDonald's as an example, right? They got a kiosk there where you can order your...
Other fast food brands are available.
Yeah, or other fast food, but I just like McDonald's.
We know his preference now.
I think so,
For sure.
There's a free free advert for McDonald's there, yeah.
Oh, but I think, especially the screens, I think there will be NFC built in. It's coming up, right? We see the first manufacturers kind of building the screens with NFC in there. So Softpos, I think, really has something to play there. Basically, right now, it's a screen, it's a separate payment terminal, it's a separate printer. It's all wrapped up in the kiosk.
Many different peripherals.
Exactly. And I think in the very near future, it will be just one screen where you can do, everything on. But for me, it's a bit different because, for example, right now, I pay always with my Apple Pay, with my wallet, and I never have to put in a PIN code. So I don't know exactly how that's going to work in different countries as well.
Exactly. It's going to be, difficult, especially for the consumer. I don't imagine people want to big letters or big numbers on the screen. They want to type in your PIN code, right? Especially if they pay with a plastic card.
But why don't I have to put in my PIN code? I never put in my PIN code. Even if I pay 500 euros, for example, I just bleep it and it's gone.
Just because you're using Apple Pay or Google Pay or something similar, and then you have authentication system in the device, meaning that you don't need to enter the PIN code. So I would say that, with that trend merging also with people using those type of products, Apple Pay, Google Pay, that would enable then, of course, that to be that problem with entering a PIN code on a big screen, that will be disappearing.
Okay.
As long as you don't use your ordinary plastic card, because then you are forced to enter PIN at some point in time. If the amount is too high, there's a limit.
Yeah, so we're kind of waiting for Softpos to become widespread enough that the technology catches up with it. Either people only use smartphones for payment, or the PIN code. Even in the UK, at least during the pandemic, the contactless limit was raised from £50 to £100. So it's already moving in that direction. So yeah.
And I think also, I'm just thinking about it now, but all my friends, all the people that I know are using, Apple Pay or Google Pay, right? So is that the market leader, or is that something where they dominate in the future with these payments as well?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think they definitely are the leaders in I would say now using the digital wallets. If the race between Google Pay, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Android Pay, whatever there are, I don't know the split here. I would assume Apple Pay is the leader. They are very aggressive in the sense of that getting the product out, connecting with the bank. So each bank needs to have a contract to be able to have the card they're issuing, that their consumers can have use the product. So then, of course, we assume here that everyone has a smart device. So, but if they have it, so they have the accessibility to the product. So I would be, if you're from a Swedish perspective, I would say that most people probably have a digital wallet right now where they're using the card in that product.
Yeah, and I also, for example, I have, two cards, for example, two bank accounts, one for my, shared bank account with my household, and then one just private. The Rabobank, for example, takes Apple Pay. Well, the other bank doesn't take Apple Pay. Right? So that's very confused. I don't like to use that bank anymore because it doesn't have Apple Pay. right? So I guess it's a dominated factor where Apple basically decides,
And
you switch banks or you should switch providers.
Yeah, these days as well,
that's
it's
the
a hell of a lot easier to change your bank account than it is to
Exactly.
change your mobile phone, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that they were coming back a little bit to the classical term that the consumer will drive the behavior and then
Yeah.
the trend, and that's been a little hard to see like 10, 15 years ago. But now you're absolutely right. I mean, will I change my bank or will I change my mobile?
Yeah, my loyalty to my iPhone is significantly more than my loyalty to HSBC or Rabobank or whatever. Yeah.
But the bank is basically
Yeah.
forced to work with Apple, right? Because otherwise you see a lot of users just disappearing.
Yeah,
to
the
that
ones
bank.
are actually they're suffering like a blow right now, right?
Yes.
And they need to catch up a little bit and make sure that they get up to speed with the current
Exactly.
technology.
Yeah.
I think the proposed or what we already see a little bit of a trend is that like some banks that don't even issue like a proper plastic card anymore. You can just get a virtual one and add it directly
Yeah.
to your
Yes.
to your wallet, right?
Yeah, especially the more traditional banks. Certainly, you get a card, you get an American Express card, you get a Visa card or whatever. But yeah, definitely, a lot of the new ones are it's purely a virtual card, and you have to specifically request and maybe even pay more for a physical card to be sent to you if it's even available. So yeah, good point.
But there's a production cost for it. So
Yeah,
I think the company card that we use actually in TidyPay is only virtual.
it's only virtual.
Sure.
A MasterCard branded one.
Yeah, exactly.
very good. Yeah. So I think when I first heard about Softpos, I was very, very concerned. I thought, what if you can just use your mobile phone to take payments, then we're not even going to need to. You're not going to need hardware anymore. You're not going to need payment devices. You're not going to need terminals to physically take payment. People will just do it on devices that they already have that they bring to work with them anyway. But I'm thinking, is this the end of hardware distribution? Will this be the last ever podcast that we record?
Exactly. Yeah.
Goodbye,
Well, that's
everyone.
what-
It's been nice working with you.
Thank you for inviting us for the last one.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for shutting down the hardware industry. But
But that's what we were a little bit afraid of, right? In the beginning, especially,
Yeah.
when we talked about Softpos, within Blue Star, of course, we didn't have the knowledge yet about Softpos. So we thought, okay, let's, put some actions behind this. And then we saw, okay, bring your own device. We don't sell Samsung. We don't sell Apple, right? It's going to be tough for us to kind of get the market in there. Blue Star sells enterprise devices, right? Rugged enterprise devices. But I think after the discussion we had, you also believe that this is going to go the route of basically enterprise devices, right? Instead of smartphones.
Absolutely. I mean, you took
or as
the,
well as maybe
Well,
alongside.
exactly, both.
you took the example of, for example, self-service in a fast food environment. So those devices will not be like it needs to be a machine that actually can manage that.
Yeah.
And I would say also in the typical environment, let's take a restaurant, for example. We have waitresses and waiters going around. An industrial hardware is probably the best option here because going around with a phone is, of course, that it doesn't suited for the purpose. Doesn't manage moisture. They are not built to be using in that way. The NFC reader, you don't
Can't
know.
print receipts, a phone either, can it? So
Can't print receipts.
Not yet.
But maybe the digital receipt. But you're coming to these basic things, and then of course the strength of the NFC reader, for example. I think most of us have been now in a situation where you're standing and trying to tap your Apple Pay or maybe a card towards the device, and they're trying to find the sweet spot for the NFC reader to connect. And on the consumer devices, that is a bit different always. So I would say that the industrial hardware is probably the best usage to be in that environment still going forward.
Then I guess we can make another podcast. We're
yes,
still in business, Rich.
we won't close the warehouse down just yet, right? So yeah.
I think another perspective regarding this is that consumer devices are very much like made to to use the NFC in the back, right? So you can tap it to pay. But when you're receiving money on the merchant's end, some consumers we found is that they're a little bit uncomfortable, tapping the back of the phone to another another phone, right? So they cannot see the amount when they're actually paying, right? So I think we see now industrial hardware coming out where the NFC is sort of pointing towards the front of the screen so people can actually see what they're paying for.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. I think you don't know how consumer behaviour is going to change in the future, so that may become more widely accepted. But yeah, let's talk for a bit about some of the alongside the technology. What are some of the geographical differences that we see in adoption of payment methods? How does that change throughout Europe? and even worldwide? What are some of the trends that we're seeing there?
Well, I think that, what we discussed as well when, we're, for example, at our event in the States, we see that it's all credit card, right?
Yeah.
And in the Netherlands, it's all debit card. I only use my credit card basically to buy stuff online because it's insurance. I know, I can at least call the company and say, hey, please, reach out to the company and get my money back. So there's, I think, some advantages where I use a credit card. But in general, I think Europe is more debit. Why is that? Why is, for example, the US credit and Europe more debit?
I would bet my money on this culture thing. And so, for example, if you have a culture where you're not used to borrowing money, except for very serious purpose like buying a house or a car, well, then the debit card is probably the one that you're using. You pay and you withdraw the money directly. While you might have a culture where credit is accepted in a much wider range, then of course people want to charge it to the credit card and then get an invoice in the end of the month, pay that, and if they don't have any money, then they will just ask to get it split up, and then you're starting using the credit financial service. So
another perspective is that in the US, they're very concerned about their credit score, right? So they actually have an incentive to go out and spend money they quote unquote don't have, and then pay it at the end of the month, right? Because as long as you're a good payer, then you improve your credit score, right?
So your interest rates probably go down or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
But I think also there's the security aspect of it here as well. So you were saying about your buying habits. You might purchase things like clothes using your credit card because you've got a bit more
security.
But security. I mean, I would do the same with airline tickets. And sometimes I've been able to benefit from. I bought an airline ticket on my credit card. The flight's subsequently been cancelled, so I've not been able to. I might get the outward journey back, but I can then use my credit card to claim back the return journey as well. So you definitely got a lot more security with credit cards there.
Yeah, I think in some areas it's even mandatory, right? If I rent a car, I'm not able to do with a debit card, right?
No,
you have to have a credit card, of course, to kind of make a reservation and to make sure that they can actually claim the money if you wreck the car, for example. So there's a lot of kind of industries that mandate credit card, I would say, instead of debit.
Increases the security for both parties in that sense. But I mean, if I look from my own perspective, going online, always use a buy now, later product or credit card, because as you say, I want to see the product before I pay it. And especially if the vendor I'm using is also managing the claim for me, saying that I'm not happy with that product. I know the vendor then will manage all the transaction needed to revert my payments. So, but in a physical environment where I get a product, I see it, of course, then I will use my debit card and then withdraw the money directly.
Yeah, especially in the Netherlands, there's a lot of restaurants that have like a written sign, says we don't accept credit cards. Because I guess the fee for a credit card for a merchant is higher, for example, as a debit card, right? So they just don't prefer to take any credit cards.
Yeah, that's true. Like certainly with the American Express, for example, that's the case. Yeah. But I think
that's a bit challenging. I think to separate some cards in the Visa Mastercard rails.
But you see it a lot in the Netherlands. Like it just has a sign, no credit card accepted.
Well, inherently from like an Interchange Plus perspective, it's credit cards are inherently more expensive to the merchant, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the times I've been to the US recently, and where especially you're in a restaurant, you've got to, they bring you the bill, you put in the nice wallet, you put your credit card in the wallet, then they take it away, then they bring you back a pen, and you have to sign for it and everything. It feels like a really, I don't know, old-fashioned.
It's writing a check.
Yeah.
You might as well pay by check. Yeah, or I should take my goats with me and use those to pay. It's I don't mind doing it, but it's when you're so used to you just wave your phone every time you want to buy something. It's something that you get used to, and I think even within Europe there are some differences as well. I mean, what about the German market? When I look at that, having travelled to Germany recently, again that seems to be much more led by cash payments and what's your take on that within the payments industry? How does the German market look?
I think it's every country in Europe is having like their own roadmap and impacted by the trends differently. So I think in the German market there could be various reasons for it. It could be that it's expensive to take cards. We have seen that one thing that drives digital payment adoption, meaning driving away cash, is of course that the country are having a digital fiscalization solution, meaning that the retail business needs to send up information about each transaction made, and that also drives them to invest in solutions that are more that can do this better. And then of course the digital payments is the perfect option for that one. Then it can be like consumer behavior. People are used to writing checks or having cash, and that also takes a while to get rid of.
Yeah, so I think it's a big part of it. And, all the time that people continue to want to pay by cash, then you've got to be able to manage that. You can't go entirely cashless. So, I think as well, a lot of introduction of new payment methods. I know quite a few years ago when in London, which is obviously quite a big tourist centre with people coming in from all over the world, a lot of tourists coming in from China that were expecting and wanting to pay with Alipay. I mean, that drove quite a lot of innovation, or at least the need to accept Alipay in London. I found that really interesting, that it was purely a very specific group of consumers that were driving the need for technology providers to implement the ability to take that kind of payment.
I think that's a good, interesting thing to see, is that you have a solution that includes a payment method like Alipay, for example, but what actually gives you probably a benefit for the retail business, because that app is probably also pointing them to your location.
Yeah.
So it's a win-win probably for both the one accepting the payment method and then the consumer. So
yeah, very closely linked together. I agree. Yeah. Just taking another different tack on this. And this is one of your favourite topics, Jord. Where does cryptocurrency fit into all of this? How's that likely to impact the payment market?
That's a tough topic, I would say, because of course cryptocurrency.
You love it. Come on.
I love it, but I don't know. It's all speculation still, right? Because it's not out there yet. Speculate. Yeah. Now I think especially in the payments on cryptocurrency, I think we see a big benefits of developing countries where, for example, somebody is coming to the Netherlands to work, in the Netherlands and sends money to the family. Within cryptocurrency, that's an immediate transaction, right? It's secure, it's immediate, and it doesn't cost you any money. And in that sense, I think cryptocurrency is already developed. So you see in, developing countries, for example, in Africa, you see that cryptocurrency is actually a thing right now, right? They actually use it. And I think as well, at some point, I think the Western countries will look at developing countries, seeing, hey, you guys are already a step ahead, basically, of us with the cryptocurrency, and then we'll implement it as well on the Western side of the world. I think really that's where it goes. Regarding real physical payments with cryptocurrency, I think we'll have to wait for that quite some time before that's going to happen. You see, of course, in some streets in London, I see we accept Bitcoin. I don't know exactly how that works. Maybe you do, but I think it's going to take a while before it's like generally accepted. And also it's consumer driven, right? If my generation or the generation before me, I think if they will implement cryptocurrency, I think they will be the ones that will be driving it. So it's again a consumer thing, of course, that will drive this to the next level. But I think right now it's we mainly see the traffic in developing countries where they start to use Bitcoin and other transactions.
How about you guys as payment providers? What's your take on cryptocurrency? Is it on your radar? Is it a consideration at the moment?
I think it's something we've discussed plenty of times, but it's a little bit difficult to assess, like whether it's actually going to be a thing here in the West, right? Some people are very much pro and in favor of it, and then you have, especially the older generation. Sorry, guys, but they don't.
These
really
kids, they're getting increasingly rude. I think, Morgan.
We're just being honest.
Exactly. No, but they seem to don't really trust or have faith in these new age currencies, right?
I can't argue with you.
No,
that's again a consumer
speaking
thing, right?
for my generation.
Yeah, but also, I made the example of my dad, for example. He still calls to the bank to see what his bank account is, right? There's a computer,
balance, right?
There's a computer, his balance. There's a computer voice telling him it's blah blah blah. That's so strange, right? So it's, I think, also an adaptation and trust, of the older generation.
It's all a little bit taking a look at what is needed to make it really a success. And we're discussing a lot of things when it comes now to traditional payments, and we have added alternative payment methods, etc. But you need a very smooth connection between the consumer and the retail business, so to speak. And if I step into a store here in Spain, for example, and say that I want to pay with cryptocurrency, then that transaction needs to be like directly connected between a couple of devices and equally as smooth as an Apple Pay transaction or whatever it is. And if you don't have that, well, then that's a big obstacle for cryptocurrency. So that is also the technology and needs to be established and infrastructure for it. And
the efficiency is still really, really critical at the point of sale, isn't it? There can be benefits to cryptocurrency, but if it's not quick, immediate, easy to use, widely accepted, then that's the barrier to it taking off in point of sale.
But of course, online environment is a different thing. But
but physical, I think it's the same as writing a check, right? You have to go into your wallet, you have to see the wallet of the merchant, and you need to make a transaction in both wallets. It's almost a private transaction that you do, right? So I think that's gonna take a while before that's smooth.
We have seen, a lot of actors trying to challenge this Visa MasterCard rails in the retail market, right, in the physical present transaction. But QR code payments, they're nice and all, but nothing beats opening your phone, tapping on the device, and then you're paid, right?
I mean, it's interesting. We've got all these different new technologies coming together. Really, really fascinating to talk about it. But as an old person who actually I've still got cash in my wallet. Maybe I don't carry a wallet around, but I've got cash stuck in the back of my phone holder, so I can pull that out if I have to pay cash for something.
Well, it's even worse. You have a card in the back. You have euros. You got pounds.
Yeah.
You got Danish krones probably as well.
Yeah, I need some Swedish ones for next week. Yeah.
Best prepared man ever.
That's a heavy phone.
Yeah, I need a bigger case. Where are we? From the very, very much the future of cryptocurrency and the past of cash. Is cash in the past? Is it still current? Do people still need to take cash payments? Because you guys are in the payment industry. You're very much focused on taking payments, particularly Softpos and Android devices. That's clearly the future, or even that's happening now. But at the same time, we still sell a hell of a lot of cash draws because people are still across Europe paying with cash.
Still, as long as cash is around, there will be a need to manage that. And I think in most countries, they like the law also that you need to accept cash.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not, it needs to be driven both from a compliance perspective and a legal perspective to get rid of cash totally. Then the question is the society really prepared for that? Because we are building everything on a digital infrastructure. So I think that is a little bit, the debate is ongoing right now. And I think also there's a question a little bit about control, because I think as soon as you have something physical that people can see, it's maybe not a goat, but it's like something with a $10 on it, and I think, this is all right, I can trust that. Then that gives more reliability often than a digital way of working. So I think we will see probably more legislation coming around this, that if you should accept or not accept. But I think cash will be around for quite some time still, definitely.
Yeah, and I think only 5 or 10% of people still pay cash from the point of view of a distributor of technology and hardware. 10% of people still paying cash. They've still got to you've still got to have a cash drawer. You've still got to have some means of handling that cash. So I think cash is, as you say, likely to be around for a while to come. So we've been here talking about all these modern payment methods that are coming through. We've touched a little bit on cash. You guys are here from a very forward-looking Android payment company, very much in favour of all the new technology methods. I want to know, Morgan, what currency have you got with you now? Have you got any cash with you? Do you carry cash?
He's calling me out?
I'm calling you out. You're looking a bit shifty there, I think. We want to know exactly what you've got. Do you fully trust these payment methods, or
I fully trust them, but I still have my wallet, of course. And if I look,
that's the moment of truth.
Okay, it's a euro.
He's got euros.
Norwegian kroner.
He's got kroner.
And Swedish kroner.
And he's got Swedish kroner. That's so 3 different currencies in his wallet.
Yeah.
Fantastic. No, that's
always prepared, like a Boy Scout.
Yes, that's always best to be. Yeah, I've got 2. I've got pounds and euros, and I'll probably need some Swedish krona for next week. So
So what about the younger guys? What do you have in your wallet?
I mean, I haven't had a wallet for like 3 years. I have this, where you can pull up the cards and there's never cash in it.
Nikolai doesn't even know what a wallet is.
No, exactly. Same here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's I guess that proves that it is a generational thing. But yeah, no, I think lots of interesting things we've covered, and it is a rapidly changing market as well. Just in by way of a summary, a couple of things really. What do we think each are the number one trends that we're seeing, and also how can people that are following this keep up with the trends that are happening in payments? From your point of view, what do you think are Jord? What do you think of it?
For me, I think it's I feel kind of for the merchants, right? Because there's new payment technologies popping up every day, I would say. Probably you're not always aware of the new payment technologies. We definitely are not aware of the new payment technologies. So I think a merchant, these days is basically overloaded with information every day, like, adverts like, hey, please use this one. And, I think right now for a merchant, it's almost impossible to choose the right payment method, I would say, because there's so much out there, right?
I fully agree. And I think important for maybe the retailer to think about is that what are the methods you need to support? Who are your customers, the consumers that are stepping in? You will immediately realize if they are wanted to pay with different methods and you're not supporting it, well, then you need to adapt. But I would guess for most retailers still in the physical environment, they still just need to have the basic assortment of payment methods available. And then, of course, I would say everything is that you need to be on top of trends and topics. Yeah. And, of course, working with good suppliers that also can help you contribute and increase your knowledge.
I think that's a really good thing. That's definitely part of why we've got you here today. Not just the fact that we love spending time with you, but I think it's a community or an ecosystem or whatever you want to call it. And I think that the value of partnerships, you can't do everything yourself. Blue Star can't do everything. Our resellers, our vendors can't do everything. And, you guys can't do everything. You can't even travel without 3 different types of currency cash in your wallet. So you can't do everything. But I think together we can we can do a lot more. And I think for me as well, one of the things that a big takeaway for me today is the fact that it's not just the point of sale can be anywhere. It's not just at the checkout in a shop or a restaurant. It's all the different, the way that payment needs to integrate into all the different ways that people are buying things. So whether that would be the point of sale still or a kiosk or some sort of mobile device, I think the fact that payment, especially Android payment, is being driven forward by the need to be able to have all these different forms of payment, these different physical places to pay in the environments where you would pay in retail and in hospitality, but also beyond that in transport and logistics. Anything else? Any other sources of information that are good that we can use, or any other key technologies that you think what's from your point of view, Nikolai? What are some of the key trends or sources of information that you think are?
Well, I think it's for sure going to be interesting to follow the development of like how especially the hardware industry will adapt to this Softpos solution, right?
Yeah.
And start making hardware that's a little bit more compatible and maybe a little bit more user-friendly and et cetera, right?
Yeah.
It's a little bit hard to imagine that it's going to get easier, but, maybe it is. And, we never know how the future brings. But I've heard, about companies who are now investigating into, paying using sound waves, which would completely eliminate, you don't even need to get your phone up and tap anymore, right?
Wow.
You could verify your payment being far away from the point of sale system, right?
So it's almost RFID then.
Yeah.
The same technology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know if I like that. I knew for a fact, when Pin and Chip came around, I knew in Amsterdam there was a big, you get the Dam in Amsterdam, it's a big square where a lot of people come together. If I have my credit card in my back pocket and you just have a terminal, right, you can just put in 25, for example, to the limit of 25 euros and you just start bleeping everybody's pocket. Right? That was a big trend a couple of years ago in Amsterdam. You should see people you're just walking with a terminal, bleeping everybody, in the back pocket, and they just had a transaction of 25 euros every time they did it. So I think, that's also, of course, the security part, needs to develop in there as well. And with RFID, I wouldn't even imagine how that would look like today, right? If you have near-end payment method where you can just bleep and you accept the payment from this distance.
For this sort of technology to work, you really need to be mindful of the security aspect for sure.
Yeah, I think security is always going to be, technology is always going to be in this industry, I think, ahead of what security requires it to do. So I think it's an interesting dichotomy between the capabilities of the technology and the restrictions that we have to have with security, because nobody can afford to lose, especially these days, nobody can afford to lose even €25. So
and I think from a point of view as well, from Blue Star, we dove into payments about 2 years ago. For me personally, I think the environment within payments is all about partnerships, right? I think we found that out. Normally, in our other verticals, we work with a reseller, for example, but in payments is all about partnership, as you have more parties that are involved in the same kind of transaction, right? It's not just you and us, for example. You have many partners as well that you need to comply with and able to take one payment. I think that's really the lesson that I learned from a Blue Star perspective.
And I think everyone's got a role to play in that.
Exactly.
We've got a role to play in terms of delivering the logistics behind those devices and getting them delivered to the merchants, usually directly to the merchants. Obviously, TidyPay with the payment solution has a role to play. The reseller obviously has to pull all of that together and create the solution. And the vendors have a part to play as well. It's
the
particularly
banks.
moving. It's it really is a series of partnerships working together. So I think, guys, it's been absolutely great talking to you today. A pleasure to have you here. You too, Jord, obviously. Also a pleasure. So it's been enjoyable making this. Keep in touch, and we'll look forward to keeping people updated in terms of what's coming next in payments. Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.